films, I really wanted to know more about you and more about your family, and actually there were loads of questions about your dad. Tell us about your childhood, maybe, you know, how was that? Were you always talking about whiskey?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. I remember when my father was originally looking at Cooley Distillery, myself and my younger brother were brought up in a car on a day trip up to the Cooley Peninsula to this old alcohol factory, and it was pretty run down and not very nice, and they had geese protecting, so no alarms or security guard, geese. I thought it was weird, and I was like, I'm going to buy this. Don't buy it, it's horrible, it's not very nice. So that was our first exposure to it. And we always knew there was a history in distilling, but it was never really communicated. We never talked about it. My father was originally a lecturer in University College Dublin, talked all about business, and then I think he wanted to walk the walk when he got to his late 30s, 40s, and set up a multitude of different businesses. So some were in oil and gas and mining and exploration, all high risk, and the other one was obviously whiskey. But he originally got the idea from studying in America. So he was outside of Ireland, and he could see and he could see the opportunity, and he could see, you know, the emerging interest in Scotch, blended and single malt, and how bad Irish whiskey was being presented and marketed to the international markets. And it planted a seed that took him quite some time to cultivate. And I suppose I grew up with the journey of starting the first new distillery in 100 years, breaking the monopoly of Irish whiskey and doing something different. And it seemed normal. This became normalized to me, and I'd seen bottles of whiskey and, you know, the startings of a new business, and being exposed to it on a regular basis when we're having dinner, people coming to our house, going to openings of new distilleries and Kilbeggan and lots of different things like that. So I think I was exposed to a very entrepreneurial business background and upbringing that probably most people don't get. But my father is quite a strong personality, and you know, as a young teenage boy, I was like, fighting against what he says was the right thing to do. I'd do my own thing, but I had an interest in business and the whole, you know, how you make things. I went to Australia, worked there for a while, and then came back to Ireland in a good frame of mind. And my father said, why don't you come in and work with us for a while? You make something, you touch it, you feel it, so the opportunity for Irish whiskey. And you know, I suppose my love was born from my experience working in Cooley, how you know to make interesting, unique expressions of Irish whiskey, and, you know, have a love for the product, but also for the category and you know, the way that it's consumed and enjoyed around the world. So I wanted to do my own thing.
Yes.
In particular because, you know, I'd worked with my father, for my father, and I felt at my age, at that stage I was in the late 30s of my life, it was like I always wanted to do something myself. And this was my opportunity. Some people can't pronounce it Teeling, they call it feeling or something, because we're not very good at pronouncing THs, or maybe it's just our family. Teeling, and you go, feeling, no, Teeling.
Feeling.
How do you spell that? Tealing. But anyway, now it's like, like the whiskey, which makes it easier.
Yeah. So what is Dublin for you, kind of, you know, how has it changed for you?
Yeah, well, I'm born and bred, I'm a Dubliner, and our families have always been Dublin. I think for me, and for me growing up, Dublin was, you know, our playground, but also it's evolved a hell of a lot, as our country has. So the EU and you know, globalization has helped Ireland tremendously, and you know, it's a young cosmopolitan city now, but it wasn't always like that. It was quite traditional for me and my generation of people, where we have been able to not emigrate. When I finished university, 90% of my class emigrated, but most of them came back, which was very unusual. It's a mixture of that old and new. It has the history, it has, you know, the culture, but also it is welcoming to people from all around the world, where they can come and enjoy, you know, creating, I suppose, what a new Ireland should be. You have to be proud of your history, but also be confident to forge a new future. And that's how I do it. So I celebrate my father, my my grandparents, Walter Teeling, but what I wanted to do was put a modern Teeling take in it. So me and my brother doing our thing to try and drive it forward, and hopefully we reflect that in the style of whiskies, our packaging, to try and tell that story. So we picked the Phoenix to symbolise the revival, and I suppose the endurance and the spirit of Dublin, in terms of, we've been through good, bad times, but we've always come through it. So there's a resilience, I feel, in our culture that gets us through the tough times, and that we will keep going. And I wanted that to be reflected in our goal to revive distilling in the city centre of Dublin, and revive our brand, and get ourselves back in the industry. And choosing that older style bottle was again an ode to the past, but also I felt you could put a modern label on it to make it stand out and make it interesting. My signature on the bottle, so as the elder statesman of the two brothers, I have the right, the honour, the responsibility to sign off in every batch.
Do you have to taste it as well?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about the taste. It's all about the taste.
And are you developing a PT whiskey?
Yeah, we are launching it later this year. So it's going to be called Black Pits. We use a combination of a Sauterne, which is a sweet dessert wine from France, and bourbon cask, and the two flavors together produces uniquely Irish smoky whiskey, if there is such a thing. So it's light, it's smooth, it has this barbecue type smoke rather than the medicinal iodine type fruit, and with this beautiful depth of fruit flavor. So it's a combination of sweetness, fruit, and some smoke that's really unique and interesting. So we're excited. The people who've tasted it have loved it, so we can't wait to get it out there.
I want to ask you about the GI of single pot still, and really your attitude, because I understand there's kind of conflicting attitude to how rigid they've made it, and how true it is to what single pot still really was.
The reality of it was back in the day there was no such thing as any limitation on what you could use. You just needed a sugar source. So they use everything. So that's the reality of it. So anything else is spin and marketing. That's just the way it is. And we were involved in doing the GI because there was only 3 distilleries at the time when it was being formulated, and we had to do it. And so there was Irish Distillers, Pernod Ricard, Diageo with Bushmills, and us in Cooley, and that was it. And we tried our best to ensure the flexibility was there in the actual document. We focused probably more on single malt because we didn't make single pot still. So single pot still was more one producer in particular make a lot of it, and they were very protective of what they did, and obviously very powerful because they're the biggest players. They dictated a lot of that, and we weren't that concerned. We were more like protect what we had, but also ensure there was some sort of flexibility. We went into it, our involvement, in best intentions to try and do it. Who would have foreseen the evolution in Irish whiskey and how quickly it happened? We're now at a stage where we've ended up with a GI document. It's good. We need it for the industry. It's there to protect the industry. Is it quite rigid? Yes, it is quite rigid. Let's just call it a spade, because what happened was what the document the industry got involved with, it got simplified down through the different steps. So when the bureaucrats and the government got involved with it, they tried to...
The percentages.
So they're at the end of the day, they're the ones that presented it, and they're the ones who wrote it exactly the way it is. And it was different, I'll be honest with you, from what we were involved in, what I was involved in, to what it became. It became even more rigid. So, and obviously in 2011, 2012, we were kicked out. We were no longer involved in it because we weren't representing Cooley anymore. And I feel that some of the amendments and simplifications are leading to some of the challenges and issues that are there. But I think there will always be people who aren't happy. And as I said, no one went into it to stifle competition, definitely not us. And there will have to be, at some way, an evolution, but when will that happen? I'm not sure. But reality is, if you look back at the history books and all the way back, there was so much variation. That was just the way it was. So the way it was can't be the way it is. So it's too important, too big an industry. There's people with too much money at stake. So if you look at it just let's say, not emotional, they're protecting what they have. And you would if you had billions and billions involved in it. So I understand that, but you know, for us to have a good, healthy industry, there has to be an element of tension between the creativity of the smaller guys and maybe just the rigidness of the bigger guys. And we're going through that interesting stage in the evolution of the category. So I think it's good that there's different people challenging and pushing.
Would you challenge it, or you're happy with the way it is?
Well, I've had some challenges that I won't go into. Simple things like, you know, putting, for example, peated beside single malt on the label. You're not allowed to do that. It makes no sense to me. Like, you know, there's nonsensical things that have become indoctrinated into it because of the way it was written and the way it's now part of the law that maybe wasn't foreseen. You know, there's definitely some challenges there. How it will evolve and how we bring the industry together, I don't know. I just think with more and more people coming in, different stakeholders with different agendas, you know, I think it's going to be a challenge. But I think for the interest of the industry, we should all try and work together to find a way of working that allows for creativity, innovation, that's based on, you know, history, but at the same time, not debase or lose any of the, you know, the brand equity or the industry's quality standards that we've grown to, you know, everyone's worked very hard to establish. So Irish whiskey is in a great place. The opportunity is bigger than ever. That's why it's attracting all these people in, and that's why, like, there's a lot of money going into it from smaller to bigger. You know, again, we just have to figure out a way that, you know, we can be inclusive and get what the industry needs at the same time as you know, protecting it, but also allowing it the flexibility to innovate it, so that we don't lose out to American whiskey or Japanese whiskey or whatever. Because if you look at Scottish whiskey is I think they're all agreed that it's a little bit too rigid, and now they're trying to loosen their regulations. So we don't want to lose out or have ourselves so straight-laced that we can't respond as tastes change and, you know, just ways of
and would you think that if the whiskey for those old ways, because I believe there's a lot of oats in there as well, is that right?
Look,
and would it make, I'm just talking about tastes really here now, like what dictates, like, you know, the recipes. But would it be possible?
I'll tell you why they use oats.
Or would be popular?
Yeah, well, oats was used to help drainage, not for flavour. So they put it in to actually help when you're actually mashing it in. So all this other stuff is a load of cobblers, if you ask me. They used it to actually help, basically, you know, it wouldn't break down as much, and it would allow for the hot water to seep down through the cereals that you're trying to mash. That was the reason why they used it. They didn't use it for flavour. Now people are spinning, like everything is, if you think about it, reality is, it's all marketing. The core of it is the taste. So if it makes it an interesting, better tasting product, fine, use it. If you want to use it for marketing, use it. But don't start lecturing to people saying that this dictates what it is, because it's not. That's not the truth. You know, and that's the thing. So everyone, I take it all with a pinch of salt. So all these people, they're all marketing themselves or marketing what they do to make it different. At the core of it is, you know, you make alcohol. That's what it is. And if you can make an alcohol that tastes different and good quality from using different ingredients, then great.
When you get together, like you guys at Christmas dinner, you talk whiskey and drink whiskey, or do you have like other topics to talk about?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting one. We just literally had a proper socially distancing birthday party for my mother. So we were in their back garden of my parents' house. And look, I think we tend to talk a lot about whiskey, but sometimes you need to just separate work from personal. My sister is, she's a professor in genetics and zoology, and she's married to an astrophysicist, so they like to talk about space, you know, DNA of bats and all this kind of stuff like that. So, and then my father might talk a little bit about mining because he's still involved in mining, and then we talk about whiskey. And what's interesting is that my father doesn't drink whiskey, doesn't drink at all.
I think you have daughters, is that right?
3 daughters, yeah,
Three
yeah.
daughters,
And if you go through the distillery,
yes,
our
there's
pot
3
stills.
barrels there. Yeah.
No, our pot stills are named after my
stills,
daughter.
exactly.
So when I set up the distillery, I had my
right.
children, and my younger brother Stephen has since had his children. So if you go on the tour, we have a maturation Teeling vault, and there's 2 barrels in there to mark the birth of his children that were made by my daughters, or the pot stills named after my daughter. So there's, it is a family distillery, and we want to get that across, but also to make them feel in some way part of the journey, because they will probably in years come. So what was it like when you're growing up when your father was building a distillery and so forth?
One of your daughters will be sitting here really.
Who knows? But I would always say the choice would always be them. I'd never force them into doing anything, because as I said, it's.
Well, they have genes, that's
true.
Through their blood,
They definitely have. They've been surrounded with whiskey, and it's funny. It was one of the first things my youngest daughter identified was barrels with our branding on it. Teeling, like one of the first things she could say. I was just driving around the car, like, could she be doing that? So yeah, they're and they love coming into the distillery, and we've always taken shots of the 3 different girls by the pot stills as they get taller. So from when we first started to where they are now, my eldest is turning 11, so becoming little.
How old are they? 11 and then.
Well, they're 10, 8, and 6, but their birthdays are all very, very soon, so they'll all be a year older and getting towards the teenage years. So that should be an interesting experience. Probably drive me to drink a lot more Teeling whiskey.
New word in like women in whiskey, because actually was another question. Women in whiskey.
Yes, there's a lot of that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So they might be those women in whiskey.
Well,
10 years down the road.
Well, they say females have a more sensitive palate. They've become much more involved in the industry now on the distilling and blending and quality control side, because of the palates are sensitive, or if not more sensitive than their male counterparts. So it used to be quite a macho industry, and it's definitely changing. But also from a consumer base, it used to be very much men drink this, women drink white spirits, but that's gone. It's rightly so. And I think Irish whiskey is taking advantage of that, and we would find here, even in terms of our tours, some of the most knowledgeable people coming through are females. They know more, than anyone, and some of the biggest collectors of our whiskies are females as well. So and a lot more whiskey clubs, which are women who whiskey, are emerging, in Europe and the US, and I'm not sure in Russia, but it's it's at the early stages of.
It's like women whiskey club.
Yeah,
like
just for women.
Just for girls, like.
So maybe just to so that they can enjoy and discuss it in an environment.
Female way.
Yeah, Irish whiskey is maybe doesn't have some of the baggage or the perceptions that some of the other styles of whiskey might have, but also the taste profile, just from our temperate environment, is a little bit delicate or softer.
Oh, lighter, yes.
Yeah, and also
good with cocktails as well.
Works very well in cocktails, yes. And as I say, once you develop a taste for whiskey, you start your journey, because it's more flavoursome. So even if you enjoy a whiskey cocktail, I think it's a starting point for people then to get into enjoying different types of whiskey in different settings. So raise a glass of our award-winning Teeling whiskey to the whiskey rooms, and as we say here in Ireland and Dublin, is Gnairi on both our lat. Let the road rise with you, and hopefully in the near future either I'll be in Moscow or you can be here in Dublin to enjoy a glass face to face. So, sláinte.
Sláinte. Very good.
Very good.
So thank you very much.
No worries.
That was fantastic.